All right, welcome in everyone, kicking off another deep dive here. And today, we're really going to dig into something that's, well, it's kind of fundamental, right? Like how we think about change. We've all got those like classic models, pretty predictable, straight line from A to B.
Right. Yeah.
But the world, well, it's not exactly playing by those rules anymore, is it? So we're going beyond that, looking at how organizations can not just deal with change, but really make it work for them. You with me?
Absolutely. And it is a huge shift. We've been stuck with this idea that change is this linear top-down kind of thing for, well, probably too long.
For way too long. So
Yeah.
to really get this, uh, think about the last time you were at the beach, right? Walking on that wet sand.
Okay. Yeah.
You press down, and what happens? Right around your foot, the sand, it almost dries out, even pushes back a little. It's a weird little quirk called dilatancy.
Dilatancy, huh?
Dilatancy. And it turns out this thing that sand does, it's like a mini lesson in how organizations act under pressure too. A market takes a sudden swing, some crazy new tech pops up, or even a big project internally.
Right. Right.
These things, they're like that pressure on the sand. And the organization, well, it can feel like it's expanding, pushing back, then trying to figure out, like, what shape to take next.
It's a great analogy. Really gets at that messy reality of change. It's not always neat and tidy.
No, not at all.
Mhm.
So how does this sand thing, this dilatancy, how does that actually help us make sense of the way change works, especially in organizations? Because it feels like things are getting more and more unpredictable, right?
Well, it highlights a key point. Change isn't just a one-way street, cause and effect. You put pressure on the system doesn't mean you get this predictable outcome. Instead, things get complex, all these internal shifts and adjustments, and that's where this concept of effectuation comes in.
Effectuation. Now, that's a word we might need to unpack a bit.
Yeah, for sure. Effectuation is kind of like this playbook, a logic for acting when things are uncertain,
Mm.
and it flips the script on how we usually approach change. Instead of dictating from the top, it's about letting things emerge, shaping change collaboratively. And that ties back to dilatancy perfectly.
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection. So instead of that, like, top-down, we're doing this approach.
Yeah, which is how it's been done for, well, forever, right?
Pretty much. You're saying it's more about enabling change to, like, bubble up from different places.
Exactly. In the old model, leadership, they're the ones pressing down on the sand. But effectuation, it's saying change is coming from everywhere. Market shifts, customers demanding new things, tech going bonkers,
Mm.
even those little experiments teams are trying out.
So it's less about one big foot and more like, well, millions of tiny grains of sand all interacting.
Perfect way to put it. It becomes this bottom-up, networked kind of thing. Leaders, they're not just directing, they're setting the stage, letting those micro forces play out.
And this all ties back to, what was it, dilatancy, right? So many interactions, like all those sand particles bumping around, that's what's causing the bigger shift to happen.
Exactly. And this leads to another really interesting shift, especially for anyone leading change. How we think about resistance. You launch a new initiative, people push back.
Oh yeah, that classic scenario.
In the traditional view, resistance is the enemy, something to squash. But effectuation flips that on its head.
Really?
It says that resistance, that pushback, it's actually information, valuable information.
So it's not just people being difficult.
Not necessarily. It could be that your idea, it needs more work, or there are genuine concerns you didn't see, and that resistance is the signal.
Huh. So back to our sand analogy,
Mhm.
it's like that expansion phase, things get unstable, but yeah, but it's also where stuff comes to the surface.
Absolutely. That tension, it can be incredibly productive. It's where you get those better, more innovative solutions.
So what's the takeaway here for, let's say, a manager trying to get their team on board with something new?
Don't just try to bulldoze through resistance. Stop. Listen. Make space for dialogue. Encourage real collaboration. There are even tools for this. Crowdsourcing platforms, agile sprints, these things build in feedback loops, so you're channeling that initial pushback, that expansion, into something that shapes the change itself.
Much more collaborative, much more well, organic, I guess you could say.
Exactly. And this leads to another big idea we often associate with change: momentum. We talk about those tipping points.
Right, where it feels like things really take off.
Right. In those linear models, you hit that threshold, then boom, the change just cascades through the organization. But effectuation suggests something different.
What, like it's not so sudden?
More like a gradual buildup. It's those small wins, those early successes, they start adding up, feeding into each other.
Okay, so back to our sand. It's not a giant wave, it's those little trickles finding their way in.
Exactly. It's about spotting those early sparks of progress and then nurturing them, helping them grow. And this is where those iterative approaches, like the lean startup model, they really shine. You build something small, test it, learn from it, repeat.
And along the way, don't forget to celebrate those small wins. It keeps the energy up, keeps people believing it's actually working.
So important. It's not just about that one big aha moment, it's the journey too.
So we've gone from big pushes to more like emergent patterns of change, but what about the end goal? Usually we think of change as leading to a new stable state, right? Like, okay, we've arrived.
Right. That new normal. It's baked into a lot of change models.
Mhm.
Implement the change, things settle down. But the thing is, in a world that's constantly disrupted, that stable state, well, it's not really stable, is it?
More like a brief pause before the next wave hits.
Exactly. Effectuation gets this. It says continuous adaptation. That's the real game. Your new normal is just a stepping stone to the next cycle of exploring, learning, adapting some more.
So the sand settles, yeah, but another footstep, another pressure is always coming.
And that's where building a culture of continuous learning, that's key. Teams need to be ready to experiment, learn fast from both the good and the bad, and be able to pivot on a dime. Agility, the ability to adapt quickly, these become essential skills, not just nice to haves.
So bringing it all together, we're talking about a huge shift in how we see change. It's not this linear, episodic thing we control. It's distributed, emergent, and it never really stops.
Right, and this framework, dilatancy plus effectuation, this helps us make sense of that new reality. Dilatancy shows us how organizations react to pressure, like that sand on the beach. And effectuation gives us a way to act, to make decisions when things are uncertain and changing all the time.
And this leads to, what did you call it, adaptive resilience.
Exactly. It's not just about surviving disruption, it's about coming out the other side stronger.
Okay, so we've got the what and the why, but what about the how? How do those effectuation principles actually work in practice? Especially when we're thinking about this dilatancy thing too.
Well, let's take affordable loss, a core principle. When we consider dilatancy, this means managing the stress on the organization carefully. Instead of betting the farm on one big, risky thing, you spread your bets. Smaller investments, more experiments, only what you can afford to lose if it goes wrong.
So dip your toes in before jumping head first, especially if the waters are murky. Makes sense. What about crazy quilt partnerships? I love that name.
Think about those sand particles all bumping around, influencing each other. Crazy quilt partnerships means organizations need to collaborate in all sorts of unexpected ways, with customers, suppliers, even competitors sometimes.
Whoa, competitors.
Yeah, you never know where a good idea will come from. These interactions, they're like those sand particles creating unpredictable but often really innovative outcomes. It's a way to tap into that interconnectedness, that web of possibilities.
And be open to the unexpected, because it might lead to something amazing. All right, what's next?
Leveraging contingencies. In traditional change management, something unexpected happens, it's a problem. But with this new lens, those stress spikes, they become opportunities. It's about being resourceful, figuring out how to turn surprises, good or bad, into a new direction or a learning moment.
Like finding a cool shell on the beach after the tide shifts unexpectedly. You weren't looking for it, but hey, there it is.
Exactly. Then there's the pilot in the plane mindset, empowering individuals, teams to take ownership and act. They're like those sand particles, rearranging themselves in response to what's happening around them. Distribute authority, build trust, and let people make decisions on the ground without needing permission for every little thing.
So less hierarchy, more autonomy, more responsiveness. I like it.
And finally, iterative refinement. This mirrors how our sand settles into a new shape under pressure. You're constantly refining your strategies, products, whatever, based on real-time data, feedback, the results of your experiments. It's about those small adjustments along the way, not sticking rigidly to a plan that might already be outdated.
Build, measure, learn, adapt. That cycle just keeps going.
Absolutely. And to make these ideas really work, there are some practical tools organizations can use.
Okay, let's hear them. How can our listeners actually start putting this into practice? Give us the goods.
One tool is emergent microdilatancy mapping. Sounds fancy, but it's basically paying close attention to those small, often unexpected things happening in your organization. Like, did two teams spontaneously collaborate? Did resources get shifted in a surprising way? Document those things, because they often have ripple effects you wouldn't expect. It's like watching those first trickles of water, seeing where they go in the sand, and it connects back to affordable loss, those low-risk experiments that can teach you a lot.
So it's about noticing those hidden dynamics, those under-the-radar things that can actually have a big impact. Cool. What else?
Self-organizing feedback networks. Create open channels where people can share ideas, flag problems, and highlight opportunities. It could be online forums, regular meetings, whatever works. The point is to encourage peer-to-peer responses, to let those spontaneous solutions emerge, like those sand particles rearranging themselves, but with people and ideas. And this ties into crazy cult partnerships, that open, collaborative spirit.
It's about building in that bottom-up flow of information, right? So much more dynamic than just waiting for instructions from the top.
Exactly. Another tool is open-ended scenario exercises. These are like training simulations for making decisions in uncertain situations. You throw a curveball at people, a new competitor appears, budgets get slashed unexpectedly, and they have to figure out what resources they have, who they can collaborate with, and what risks they can afford to take, all on the fly. It gets them thinking in that effectuation mindset, ready to adapt to whatever comes their way.
It's like a workout for their adaptability muscles, getting
Yeah.
them comfortable with that constant shifting and rearranging, like our sand. All right, what's the last one?
Adaptive role fluidity. This means letting roles and responsibilities within teams be more, well, fluid. Instead of rigid job descriptions, let people step up based on what the situation demands. Maybe someone's a brainstorming rock star, so they lead that phase. But someone else is a project management whiz, so they take over for implementation. It makes teams much more agile, responsive, just like those sand particles finding the best configuration under pressure. And again, it's about that pilot in the plane mindset, empowering people to take charge.
So leadership isn't fixed. It flows depending on what's needed. That's a powerful idea.
It is. These tools are all about moving away from that command and control mentality, embracing emergence, collaboration, and continuous learning, and never forgetting that change always involves risk, so be smart about it.
This has been an incredible deep dive. We started with a simple image, stepping on wet sand, and look where we ended up. A whole new framework for understanding and creating resilience in organizations.
It really highlights that change isn't something to fear. It's not this thing we can control perfectly. It's a constant process, and it's collaborative. And by getting these concepts, playing around with these tools, you can help your organization not just survive change, but actually thrive on it.
So as you go about your week, think back to the last big change you saw or were part of. Did it feel linear and predictable, or were there surprises, adaptations, maybe even some productive resistance? And knowing what we know now, what could have been different with that effectuation mindset? It's definitely a new way to see how organizations adapt and succeed in this crazy complex world. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.